The sun hung low over the pristine lawns of Willow Creek, a gated community where every blade of grass seemed to bow in deference to the Homeowners Association's ironclad regulations. The neighborhood gleamed with an almost unnatural perfection: manicured hedges, polished mailboxes, and houses that looked like they'd been lifted from a glossy magazine. But beneath the surface of this idyllic suburban enclave, a current of judgment and exclusivity simmered, ready to boil over at the slightest provocation. Amara Okoye stepped out of her modest rental car, her heels clicking against the cobblestone driveway of her new home on Magnolia Lane. The air was thick with the scent of jasmine and freshly cut grass, but Amara's senses were attuned to something else entirely, the weight of eyes watching her from behind pristine curtains. She smoothed the front of her tailored blazer, her dark eyes scanning the row of houses. She'd expected scrutiny. She was a black woman with a Nigerian accent moving into a predominantly white, affluent neighborhood. But she hadn't anticipated the intensity of it, the way it seemed to press against her skin like a physical force. Amara was no stranger to being underestimated. At 38, she'd built a career as an educator, rising from a classroom teacher in a struggling urban school to a respected administrator known for turning around failing institutions. Her latest role, principal of Willow Creek High School, was her most significant challenge yet. The school, nestled within the heart of this wealthy community, had a reputation for academic excellence, but was plagued by internal politics and a toxic culture of elitism. Amara had been hired to fix it, but she knew the real battle wouldn't be in the classrooms. It would be in the community itself. Her first encounter with Willow Creek's HOA came that very afternoon. She was unloading boxes from her car when a sleek black SUV pulled up, its tinted windows reflecting the golden sunlight. The driver's door opened, and out stepped Cynthia Hargrove, the HOA president, her blonde hair perfectly coiffed, her smile as sharp as a blade. Cynthia was the kind of woman who wielded her authority like a scepter, her presence commanding attention and obedience in equal measure. "Welcome to Willow Creek," Cynthia said, her voice dripping with practiced warmth. "I'm Cynthia Hargrove, president of the HOA, and you must be—" "Amara Okoye," Amara replied, extending a hand. Her accent, rich with the cadences of her native Igbo, colored her words. She saw the flicker in Cynthia's eyes, a quick, almost imperceptible tightening of her smile. "Oh, how unique," Cynthia said, her tone laced with something Amara couldn't quite place. "We're very particular about our community standards here. I'm sure you'll find the handbook helpful." She handed Amara a glossy booklet, its cover embossed with the Willow Creek logo, a stylized willow tree encircled by a wrought iron gate. "Thank you," Amara said, her voice steady despite the subtle barb. She'd heard that tone before, the one that said, "You don't belong here." But she wasn't here to make waves, not yet. She took the handbook, her fingers brushing against the embossed cover, and offered a polite nod. As Cynthia drove away, Amara caught snippets of conversation from a group of neighbors gathered on the sidewalk. They were a mix of impeccably dressed women and a few men, their voices low, but not low enough. "Did you hear her accent?" one woman whispered, her voice tinged with disdain. "Where is she even from?" "Probably some diversity hire," another replied, her laugh sharp and cutting. "Can you imagine her trying to fit in here?" Amara's jaw tightened, but she kept her focus on the boxes, her hands moving with deliberate calm. She'd learned long ago to let such comments slide off her like water off a duck's back. But as she carried a box into her new home, she couldn't shake the feeling that Willow Creek was a battlefield, and she'd just stepped onto the front lines. Over the next few days, Amara settled into her role as principal, though she kept her position a secret from her neighbors. She wanted to observe Willow Creek from the ground up, to understand the dynamics of the community before revealing her authority. The school was a microcosm of the neighborhood, wealthy, privileged, and fiercely protective of its status quo. The faculty was a mix of dedicated educators and entrenched veterans who viewed her with suspicion, their whispers echoing the same sentiments she'd heard on Magnolia Lane. The HOA, however, was her true adversary. Cynthia Hargrove and her inner circle, Karen Whitmore, a real estate agent with a penchant for gossip, and Richard Langley, a retired lawyer who treated every HOA meeting like a courtroom, ran Willow Creek like a fiefdom. They enforced rules with a zeal that bordered on obsession, from the precise shade of beige allowed for house exteriors to the acceptable height of mailbox flags. Amara's first HOA meeting, held in the community center's cavernous meeting room, was a masterclass in passive-aggressive power plays. "Your lawn is a tad overgrown," Karen remarked during the meeting, her eyes fixed on Amara. "We do have standards, you know." Amara smiled, her voice calm but firm. "I'll have it taken care of. I've been busy settling in." "Settling in?" Richard echoed, his tone suggesting she'd committed a capital offense. "Well, we hope you'll adapt to our ways quickly. Willow Creek isn't just a place to live, it's a lifestyle." The room buzzed with murmurs of agreement, and Amara felt the weight of their collective judgment. Her accent, her appearance, her very presence seemed to offend their carefully curated world. But she wasn't here to conform, she was here to lead. As the meeting adjourned, Cynthia approached her, her smile as brittle as ever. "We're hosting a welcome party for new residents this weekend. You'll come, won't you? It's a great way to integrate." "I wouldn't miss it," Amara replied, her eyes meeting Cynthia's. The word integrate hung between them, heavy with unspoken implications. The welcome party was held at the Hargrove estate, a sprawling mansion that screamed old money. Amara arrived in a vibrant Ankara dress, its bold patterns a stark contrast to the sea of beige and pastel that dominated the gathering. The moment she stepped into the backyard, conversations paused, heads turned, and whispers followed her like a shadow. "She's certainly colorful," Karen murmured to a group of women, her wine glass tilted just so. "Does she even understand how things work here?" another woman added, her voice low but not low enough. Amara sipped her drink, her ears catching every word. She mingled, her smile unwavering, but inside she was cataloguing every slight, every snide remark. They didn't know who she was, but they would, soon. The party was a microcosm of Willow Creek's social hierarchy, cliques of power couples, their children running wild, and the ever-present spectre of the HOA looming over it all. Amara overheard discussions about school fundraisers, teacher evaluations, and complaints about the direction of Willow Creek High. The parents, it seemed, were as invested in controlling the school as they were in controlling their lawns. "Your kids go to Willow Creek High, don't they?" Amara asked a woman named Susan, who'd been particularly vocal about the school's declining standards. "Oh yes," Susan replied, her tone patronizing. "We're very involved. The new principal, whoever they are, has their work cut out for them. We expect excellence, you know." "I'm sure they'll deliver," Amara said, her voice neutral but her eyes gleaming with quiet resolve. As the night wore on, the whispers grew bolder. A group of men near the bar made no effort to lower their voices as they mocked her accent, mimicking her cadence with exaggerated gestures. Amara stood just out of their line of sight, her heart pounding but her face a mask of calm. She was no stranger to prejudice, but the brazenness of it here in this polished enclave was a different beast altogether. When Cynthia took the stage to give a toast, her eyes locked onto Amara's. "To new beginnings," she said, her voice carrying across the crowd, "and to those who choose to embrace our community's values." The toast was met with applause, but Amara felt the subtext like a slap. This was no welcome, it was a warning. As she drove home that night, Amara's hands gripped the steering wheel, her mind racing. She'd come to Willow Creek to lead a school, but she was beginning to see that her true mission was bigger. This community, with its manicured lawns and manicured egos, needed a reckoning, and she was just the woman to deliver it. The halls of Willow Creek High School were a study in controlled chaos. Teenagers streamed through the corridors, their laughter and chatter bouncing off the polished floors. The walls were lined with trophy cases, a testament to the school's academic and athletic prowess. But Amara knew better than to be dazzled by the shine. She'd spent her first week as principal poring over reports, meeting with teachers, and observing classes. The school was a pressure cooker, students pushed to breaking points by parental expectations, teachers caught between ambition and apathy, and a culture of entitlement that permeated every interaction. Amara's office was a sanctuary of sorts, its walls lined with books and a single framed photo of her late parents, their smiles a reminder of the resilience they'd instilled in her. She sat at her desk, her laptop open to a spreadsheet detailing the school's budget, when her assistant, a nervous young woman named Emily, knocked on the door. "Mrs. Hargrove is here to see you," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. Amara's lips curved into a faint smile. "Send her in." Cynthia swept into the room, her designer purse clutched like a shield. She hadn't expected to find Amara behind the principal's desk, and the shock was evident in the way her smile faltered. "Amara," Cynthia said, her voice tinged with disbelief, "you're the new principal." "I am," Amara replied, rising from her chair. Her accent, once a target of mockery, now carried the weight of authority. "Please, have a seat." Cynthia sat, her posture rigid, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape. "I had no idea," she said, her voice strained. "You didn't mention it at the party." "I didn't see the need," Amara said, her tone even. "I prefer to let my work speak for itself." The meeting was ostensibly about the upcoming school fundraiser, but Amara knew it was a power play. Cynthia represented the PTA, a group as influential as the HOA, and she wasn't accustomed to being caught off guard. She peppered Amara with questions about her qualifications, her plans for the school, her vision for maintaining Willow Creek's reputation. Each question was laced with skepticism, a challenge to Amara's legitimacy. "I've reviewed the school's performance metrics," Amara said, steering the conversation. "We're strong in academics, but there's a significant gap in student mental health support. I'm prioritizing counseling services and inclusive programs to address that." Cynthia's eyes narrowed. "Inclusive? Our students are already performing at an elite level. We don't need to dilute that." Amara leaned forward, her gaze unwavering. "Excellence doesn't mean exclusivity, Cynthia. Every student deserves to thrive, not just the ones who fit a certain mold." The tension in the room was palpable, but Amara held her ground. Cynthia left with a tight smile and a promise to discuss things with the PTA, but Amara knew the real discussion would happen behind closed doors, in the group chats and coffee clutches where Willow Creek's elite plotted their moves. The news of Amara's position spread like wildfire. By the next HOA meeting, the whispers had turned into outright murmurs of discontent. Karen Whitmore cornered Amara in the community center's lobby, her voice dripping with false concern. "We're just worried about the school's direction," Karen said, her eyes glinting. "It's nothing personal, but your background might not align with our community's values." Karen flushed, but before she could respond, Richard Langley joined them, his presence as imposing as ever. "We just want to ensure our children's education isn't compromised," he said, his tone patronizing. "We've always had a certain standard here." Amara's smile didn't waver. "I'm here to raise standards, not lower them. You'll see." The HOA's resistance wasn't limited to words. Over the next few weeks, Amara faced a barrage of complaints about her proposed budget cuts to unnecessary extracurriculars, her insistence on diversity training for staff, and even her unconventional approach to discipline. Anonymous emails flooded her inbox, questioning her competence and mocking her accent. One particularly vicious message, signed Concerned Parents, suggested she go back to where she came from. But Amara was undeterred. She worked late into the night, crafting policies to address bullying, expanding access to advanced placement courses, and meeting with students to hear their concerns. She earned the respect of the faculty, many of whom had grown weary of the PTA's overreach, and began to win over the students, who saw in her a leader who genuinely cared. Outside the school, however, the HOA's campaign intensified. At a neighborhood block party, Amara overheard Karen and Susan plotting to rally parents against her initiatives. "She's pushing too hard," Karen said, her voice low. "We need to remind her who really runs this community." Amara didn't confront them, not yet. Instead, she focused on building alliances. She befriended Maria Gonzalez, a single mother and one of the few non-white residents in Willow Creek who shared stories of her own struggles with the HOA. She also connected with Ethan Carter, a young teacher who'd been ostracized for his progressive views. Together, they formed a quiet but growing resistance, a coalition of those who'd been marginalized by Willow Creek's elite. As the school year progressed, Amara's reforms began to show results. Test scores remained high, but more importantly, student morale improved. The counseling program she'd championed was helping kids like Sarah, a shy sophomore who'd been struggling with anxiety, and Jamal, a talented athlete who'd been unfairly disciplined under the old regime. Parents began to notice the changes, and while some, like Cynthia and her allies, doubled down on their opposition, others started to question the HOA's narrative. The turning point came at the annual Willow Creek High School Gala, a glitzy event attended by the community's elite. Amara was expected to give a speech, and she knew it was her chance to set the tone. Dressed in a stunning emerald gown, she took the stage, her presence commanding the room. The whispers stopped, replaced by a tense silence. "Good evening," she began, her accent clear and unapologetic. "I came to Willow Creek to lead, not to conform. I came to build a school where every student has a voice, not just the loudest ones. And I came to show that leadership isn't about where you're from or how you sound. It's about what you do." The room was silent for a moment, then erupted in applause, led not by Cynthia or her clique, but by the students and parents who'd seen the impact of Amara's work. Cynthia's face was a mask of barely concealed fury, but Amara didn't care. She'd drawn a line in the sand and she was ready for the fight. The air in Willow Creek had shifted. Spring gave way to summer, and with it came a heat that seemed to mirror the growing tension in the community. Amara Okoye had become a polarizing figure, admired by those who saw her as a breath of fresh air, reviled by those who viewed her as a threat to their carefully curated world. The HOA, led by Cynthia Hargrove, was no longer content with whispers and complaints. They wanted Amara gone. The campaign against her was relentless. Anonymous flyers appeared in mailboxes, accusing her of radicalizing the school. Social media posts, carefully worded to avoid direct libel, questioned her qualifications and mocked her accent with cruel memes. At HOA meetings, Cynthia and her allies pushed for a formal review of Amara's performance, citing community concerns about her leadership. But Amara was prepared. She'd spent months building a case, not just for her reforms, but for the toxic culture that had festered in Willow Creek for years. She'd documented every incident of harassment, every discriminatory comment, every attempt to undermine her authority. She'd also rallied a coalition of supporters, parents, students, and teachers who believed in her vision. The final showdown came at the HOA's annual general meeting, held in the community center's grand auditorium. The room was packed, the air thick with anticipation. Cynthia stood at the podium, her voice smooth and commanding as she presented a motion to petition the school board for Amara's removal. "We've always prided ourselves on excellence," Cynthia said, her eyes scanning the crowd. "But under Ms. Okoye's leadership, our school is veering off course. We cannot allow our children's futures to be jeopardized by someone who doesn't understand our values." The room buzzed with murmurs, some in agreement, others in dissent. Amara sat in the front row, her hands folded calmly in her lap, her face betraying nothing. When Cynthia finished, Amara rose, her presence drawing every eye in the room. "I'd like to respond," she said, her voice steady and clear. She walked to the podium, her heels echoing in the silence. "For months I've heard the whispers. I've seen the flyers. I've read the emails telling me I don't belong. And I've listened to this community judge me, not for my work, but for my accent, my skin, my very existence." She paused, letting her words sink in. "But let me tell you what I've done. I've increased access to mental health resources, saving students from the pressure cooker you've created. I've expanded opportunities for every child, not just the ones you deem worthy. And I've shown that leadership isn't about power, it's about service. She pulled out a folder, its contents meticulously organized. Here is the evidence of my work: test scores, student testimonials, teacher evaluations. And here, she said, holding up another folder, is the evidence of your prejudice. Emails, recordings, screenshots of your attempts to undermine me. You mocked my accent, but you didn't know I was listening. You didn't know I was the principal. The room erupted in gasps and murmurs. Cynthia's face paled, her hands gripping the edge of her chair. Amara continued, her voice rising with conviction. Willow Creek isn't yours to gatekeep. It's a community, and communities thrive when everyone has a voice. I'm not here to tear down your traditions. I'm here to make them better. And if you can't handle that, then maybe it's you who doesn't belong. The applause started slowly, then grew into a roar. Students stood first, followed by parents like Maria Gonzalez, who'd found a champion in Amara. Even some of Cynthia's allies hesitated, their confidence shaken. The vote on the motion was called, and it failed spectacularly, with only a handful of diehards supporting it. Cynthia resigned as HOA president the next day, her influence shattered. Karen and Richard faded into the background, their voices no longer carrying the weight they once did. Amara's reforms continued, transforming Willow Creek High into a model of inclusivity and excellence. The community too began to change, slowly, grudgingly, but undeniably. Amara stood on her front porch one evening, the jasmine-scented air soft against her skin. The neighborhood was quieter now, the whispers replaced by tentative gestures of goodwill, a neighbor's wave, a child's smile. She'd come to Willow Creek as an outsider, mocked and underestimated, but she'd carved out her place, and she wasn't done yet. If you liked this story, please like, subscribe, and share it with others so they can learn something from it too.